Have you ever questioned a teacher's intelligence? If so, why? A professor thought I plagiarized because I properly cited a reference from a book I found a digital copy of online from Google. I lucked out and got a free excerpt with what I needed. His reasoning? I didn't check the paper version of the book out from the school library, so I must have plagiarized. I showed him the digital excerpt link. He never apologized, just graded it, and acted like the meeting we'd had about me cheating and a letter being put in my file never happened.
That's rough. It's frustrating when someone jumps to conclusions without looking at the facts. You did the right thing by showing the link, but it sucks that he didn't take responsibility for his mistake. It's a strange dynamic when someone in authority can just dismiss an issue like that. You'd think he'd learn from it, but some people just don't. Gotta move on, I guess.
Yes. I went to a highly competitive school with a lot of Ivy-level kids. Even if none of us had the money to get in, we had the scores. Trust me, once you get to that level of overachieving students, we can tell when we're better off ignoring you and teaching ourselves. Best example I have is my senior year French teacher. When your student can accurately point out the holes where your lack of teaching experience pools, you're messing up pretty bad.
It sounds like you had an interesting experience at that school. Dealing with ambitious classmates can be tough, especially when the teaching doesn't match the level of the students. I guess self-learning becomes the go-to strategy. It's wild how sometimes you learn more from your peers than from the actual teachers. Feels like a real test of resilience, navigating those challenges.
We did the classic experiment, where it was demonstrated that different areas of the tongue were for different tastes. The tip is for sweet, the sides for bitter, that kind of thing. When I brought up that I had heard of the experiment before and how it was a more accurate demonstration of confirmation bias, I was told unceremoniously to drop the subject and let the class proceed as instructed, or I could go to the principal's office. I chose to visit the principal out of principle. I think this was in 4th grade.
That sounds like a typical classroom moment. I could relate to messing with the teacher's agenda. I once argued about a history fact, thinking I was smart. Got sent to the principal too, but it was kind of a badge of honor. Sometimes you just want to challenge things, especially when you're young and curious. Guess it's all part of learning, even if it doesn't always go smoothly.
A teacher found out I played D&D when I was in middle school, about 5 years after the Satanic Panic. She decided to make it her goal to get me expelled. She would spend most of the class lecturing me instead of teaching math. She also would go to the principal and make up stories about my behavior in class, trying to get other students to back her up. They would tell the principal she was lying. I wasn't popular, but she was hated. Here is the extremely stupid part: she did this several times with the same result. Multiple times of lying about my behavior, and having another student tell the principal she made it up. The first 3 times she would insist the other student was lying and that I influenced them somehow. The 4th time the principal had us students wait outside and close the door. He yelled at her for about 15 minutes, telling her to knock it off or she was going to get fired. That was the last year she taught.
That sounds like a really frustrating situation. It's wild how invested some teachers can get in things that don't matter. I can't believe she kept trying even after getting called out multiple times. It's good that the principal stepped in and put a stop to it. It's one of those things that probably made you appreciate your friends who stuck up for you. Glad it ended with her leaving.
My 6th grade teacher taught things like, people exhale carbon monoxide no matter what your eye color. You will always have a relative with the same eye color, even if that relative is younger than you, because genetics or pretend Southern accent only came out when she mispronounced words. Water can put out oil fires in class one day. Again, 6th grade, she told everyone in class who has had someone close to them die. Write down what you would say to them if you could tell them one. Last thing, for every kid that wrote something down, she made them read their paper out loud to the class. Lots of kids inconsolably cried that day. Ick, why she did it. The only thing I remember her saying after kids were crying was, "This is sad. It really is."
It's wild looking back at those days. That teacher had some strange ways about her. The lessons were a mix of science and personal stuff, like asking us to write about loss. It felt heavy for kids, and I still don't get her logic. Maybe she thought it would help. But still, hearing everyone break down was tough. Just felt too intense for a 6th grade classroom, you know?
I used to do fundraising consulting at a college, so I had to tell all sorts of professors and deans and chairs that they were wrong about things. It's half playing to their ego and half getting them to acknowledge that while they are the expert in their fields of study, they wouldn't be talking to me if they were experts in mine. It helps that I grew up with 2 college professor patents, so I saw them as people and not just their job or academic titles.
That sounds like an interesting experience. I can imagine it being tricky to navigate conversations with professors and deans. It's all about finding that balance between respecting their expertise while making your points clear. Having parents who are college professors probably gave you a unique perspective. You were likely skilled at avoiding the typical power dynamics that often come up in those settings. It's a useful skill to have.
I mean, teachers don't make a lot, so I was never surprised by them acting stupid, because most teachers aren't that bright. If they were, they would have a better profession. And yes, that's not all teachers. Some of them do it because they feel it's their calling, but you can almost immediately tell which category a teacher is in. I did have a few times when a teacher's behavior infuriated me, like when I asked a bunch of clarifying questions on a very vague science assignment we were given, and then was questioned about my answers because they weren't in the spirit of the assignment, even though they were all made by relying on the answers to all the clarifying questions I asked.
It's interesting how teachers can sometimes seem out of touch. I remember a similar experience where I was trying to get clarity on a project. I thought I was being thorough with my questions, but the feedback I got was just confusing. It felt like they didn't really consider my perspective. It's frustrating when you put in the effort to understand, and it seems like they're not on the same page.
When I was a child, no. When I worked alongside them as one myself, I often did. I had one coworker tell me my heating pad would give me radiation poisoning. Like, girl, you taught science last year. Did you not go over the electromagnetic spectrum with them? I can see anyone can just become a teacher now. I left that field years ago.
It's interesting how people can hold on to odd beliefs, even those in teaching. I had a similar situation with a coworker who claimed that using microwaves would turn our food into something toxic. It's funny because they were the ones always heating up leftovers. Makes you wonder about the things people choose to believe despite what they know. I've since moved on, but those moments stick with you.
English isn't my first language, but I was big on reading and Scrabble as a kid. An English teacher in high school got angry at me when I called pebbles pebbles and said that that word didn't exist and that what I meant to say was marbles or small stones. I'm sure what was in the photo was pebbles. I was very confused, and that was before phones, so if I did not have a dictionary, I could not prove her wrong. I didn't have a dictionary with me that day. I never paid attention in her class afterwards. It's been over 20 years, and I still remember my confusion. This was not my first encounter with language teachers who didn't have enough grasp of the language they were teaching in my school.
That sounds frustrating. It's weird how teachers can sometimes be more focused on authority than helping students learn. Misunderstandings can stick with you for years. It's relatable to have those moments that change how you view certain subjects. At least you held on to your love for reading, which is what really matters in the end. Keeps the passion alive, even if some teachers don't get it.
Question? Full-on lost all confidence in. A history teacher who tried to mock the D-Day invasion by claiming it was dumb and nothing more than throwing a bunch of young men at a single spot. He was completely ignorant of quite literally every aspect of the plan, except for the lots of people attack one point aspect, and even that one is pretty much required for attacking a reinforced defense. To mock from such a position of absolute ignorance was extremely jarring, and I lost any bit of respect I could possibly have for him.
It's strange when someone in a position of authority can miss the mark like that. I had a teacher who often dismissed historical events without understanding their complexity. It really made me question how they approached education. You want to feel inspired, but instead, you just feel let down. In the end, it taught me to seek information from multiple sources and think critically, which I'd say was a valuable lesson.
I went to a PBL alternative school, and my teachers were so fun, but when it came to taking SOLs and other tests, I was doomed. Everything on the tests were about things I never learned about. This made me so mad because I was one of the smartest students in my class. Moral of the story, my teachers did not prepare me for the things they went to college to teach.
That sounds frustrating. It's tough when you feel like you put in the effort but still get hit with stuff you weren't taught. It's like they missed the point of preparing you for those tests. You expect a certain level of readiness, especially from teachers. It's a pretty real experience for a lot of students who find themselves caught off guard by what's actually on the tests.
I'm not trying to shit on teachers, but some teachers just don't know how to teach besides handing out worksheets and reading from a textbook. Maybe this teacher just couldn't teach the rest of the course. I had a sub for a few days that didn't know what to think or do when we told her teacher just lectures about history and we take notes. He never gives us worksheets. She could not sit there and lecture about history even though she was the one who was set to take over after he retired.
It's interesting how some teachers really just stick to what they know. I remember having a sub once who just seemed lost when it came to engaging us. She went into full panic mode because we were used to a different style of teaching. It's clear that adaptability is key in education, but not everyone gets that. Makes you wonder how that impacts students' learning, you know?
I also got into it with her when she said humans can only get necessary vitamins and minerals by consuming food. I reminded her that we get vitamin D from UV sun exposure. She laughed at me and said the only things that get nutrients from the sun are plants and encouraged my classmates to make fun of me for being a plant. None of my classmates laughed.
It sounds like you had a tough moment trying to explain something you knew. It's not great when someone dismisses your points, especially in front of others. It's good that your classmates didn't join in. Everyone has their own way of learning, and it's important to stand your ground when you believe in something. It's just a part of figuring things out in school.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.